Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So, the revolution is underway. Jim Ratcliffe has now had his Ineos takeover approved. I think they're just waiting on the actual funds to go through, which are due to go through today. And the deal is done. And now, we've brought in Omar Barada to be our new CEO as we poached him from Manchester City. A poach they did not like very much, but we've done it, and we now have a new CEO. I believe he's not going to start until the summer, but I think they're going to try and get him started earlier than that. But just before we get into who else Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe are planning to bring into this club, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button because it's a juicy one. We've got one lined up that is very nice for you for the next few minutes. Anyway, let's get right into it. So, as I just mentioned, Ineos takeover has now been approved by the Premier League. It took a little bit longer, I think, than we all expected. About 8 weeks or so, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Um, but it's now done. He is now allowed to get on with the job that you've already seen him kind of do in the background with bringing the likes of Omar Barada in. And now it looks like the next steps of bringing a director of football in and getting the proper recruitment team into the club is now underway and hopefully in place for this summer's transfer season. So the first person that was brought up and looks to be happening in the next few weeks is Dan Ashworth. Now, this guy is a big name in football. He is currently the director of football and head of recruitment over at Newcastle, and you've seen some of the players they have brought in. Yeah, I don't think he was responsible for the likes of Bruno Guimaraes, but he brought in the likes of Isaac and Anthony Gordon, and you've seen how well those players have performed for those clubs. And so you can tell that he's had a good eye for players to bring in. And not only has he worked at Newcastle over the last year and a half or so, he was also at Brighton. And we've all been saying, why don't we do things the way Brighton are doing? And it looks like we are going to try. He did help bring in the likes of, um, what's his face? Alexis McAllister, who's now at Liverpool. I don't think he had much of a say in Moises Caicedo, but he may have done Moises Caicedo as well. Evan Ferguson, all these players you see, he's kind of either developed that groundwork to bring them in or brought those players in himself. And you see what Brighton have been doing the last few seasons, and I would say that's a big credit to Dan Ashworth. Before that, he was involved with the England FA, help bringing in the young players. I think this was around 2017, 2018. So he was helping bring players in like Bukayo Saka, Phil Foden. I think even Jude Bellingham was on that list. So he was part of that 2018 World Cup run where we did very well, and was actually in a few years prior to that, just setting the groundwork of what the England national team future should be. So, he has a good hand in bringing youth into the new setup. And before that, he did a very, very good job at West Brom, as good for their standards of the club. So, this is a guy that comes in with a very, very high pedigree. He knows Jim Ratcliffe very well. And it just seems like he knows his hand on how to deal transfers. So the only question is now is that we might pay 10 million just to get him to the club. I think that 10 million would include a thing where he can start within a few weeks. There's no gardening leave where he has to work for 6 months, a year, still at Newcastle, can't talk about anything. I think Manchester United and Ineos will pay a little bit more to get him now because we need him in by the summer, preferably before the summer, lining up those transfers to go ahead. So I think that's major news, guys. I think that's everything Ineos is doing in this department seems like it's the correct way to go. Yeah, it's quite good to hear. Now, the next guy they're looking to possibly bring in is Jason Wilcox. He's currently the uh, director of football at Southampton and has had loads of success either at Southampton. I know they haven't really done well as a club, but I believe he's also worked from, I'm trying to read here as well. I think he worked down at, where was it? I think he's mainly just South. Oh, no. He worked for a decade. Sorry. My bad. It was for a decade at Manchester City. He is credited with progressing the careers of Phil Foden, Rico Lewis, Cole Palmer, um, the other Oscar Bob as well. So he knows as well youth and what it takes to be at a top level talent. Why he left there to go to Southampton, maybe to take up a bigger role um, as a director of football, because at Manchester City he was the chief football operations manager. Oh, my bad. No, I read that wrong. He didn't have that higher role at Manchester City, so I think he left for a bigger role, and now we're looking to poach him. Now, this is not an either or with Dan Ashworth or Sam Wilcox. I believe it'll be Dan Ashworth at the head, Wilcox working right under him. Um, could be a very good move for that as well, seeing what he's done with Manchester City, seeing some of the players he brought into Southampton as well. I think he brought in the likes of Romeo Lavia, which was a connection from Manchester City because he was an academy graduate there. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting appointment. Another very, very interesting appointment that is on the table now. Now, I'm not sure how this works, if this is going to be instead of Sam Wilcox or maybe having a two-person recruitment team and then a head above them in Dan Ashworth, and that's Sam Jewell. Sam Jewell is currently the head of recruitment over at Brighton. Again, Brighton. We know how good they do at scouting, unknown players. I think he was the guy who did get maybe Caicedo in. Definitely saw De Zerbi come in. Yeah, he's seeing. He's also credited with McAllister, Caicedo. It's saying so him and Dan Ashworth must have worked together at some point. So this is another big one. I kind of am leaning towards Sam Jewell over Jason Wilcox. But if we get both of them in, I think that's a hell of a good coup, and that will really, really set up our recruitment team and director of football for the next possibly decade, because the only way up from there is going to a place like Madrid, maybe a Barcelona. So yeah, I think this is probably the most interesting time in the Manchester United history in the last 20 years. We haven't had anything like this since the Glazers come in and since Alex Ferguson left. So I think things are looking, pretty good for the future. I would also urge not to get too excited because, things tend to get fucked up with Manchester United in general. But the moves Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe are making right now seem to be very, very good ones. And some of the players we might have lined up to come into the summer that we're looking at right now seem pretty decent. I'm not really on the Frankie de Jong train, but knowing what these guys look at and knowing the players they bring in, I think we can look forward to spending reasonably, not overspending, and not just bringing players in, but we have players, I think, that will help get players out of the club. We have a lot of players that still need to go, and we've got to raise a lot of money. There's been talks around $450 million to spend this summer, but I think that is going to have to include player sales, such as the likes of maybe a Scott McTominay, a Harry Maguire, a Casemiro, maybe even an Anthony, along with saving on wages with like Anthony Martial, maybe Casemiro again, Rafael Varane. We have a lot of high earners. I think they're going to try and get out of the club. And what a better team to do it. Looks like we're getting our dream team set up. Now, if we can maybe get a couple more international recruiters on our team, ones that, know what they're looking for, I think that would be another big plus. And I think I've also heard now that we have, let me check this out. I completely glossed over this, is that we did take Arsenal's doctor. I'm checking this right now. Yes. So Gary O'Driscoll has now taken up a new role as head of sports medicine for Manchester United, overseeing all medical activity across our men's, women's, and academies team. He joined the club from the same role at Arsenal, where he spent the last 14 years overseeing them with over 600 games with them. So yes, we have also just poached Arsenal's head of medicine, which I think is going to be huge, because the last decade, we've had horrible injuries. I mean, Luke Shaw has been nothing but injury prone. I don't even know what the hell is going on with Tyrell Malacia, but always injuries constantly happening, derailing our season, bringing players back too soon. So I think it's very, very good we're looking at a new, or we're not looking, but we've got a new head of sports medicine because for a long time now, this club has had too many injuries and too many stupid injuries from either bringing players to back too soon to miss